Imagine a world where the rules are flipped. Global alliances are shaken, trade wars ignite, and the strongest country on Earth decides to disrupt it all. It isn't science fiction. It's a glimpse into 2025, driven by one man's America First vision. This is the Atlas Shift, and we're diving into how Donald Trump's policies could transform the world, and why it might leave everyone scrambling. Donald Trump's inauguration on January 20th coincides with the opening of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Since the Cold War's end, Davos has symbolized elite-driven globalization, focusing on economic interdependence over geopolitical rivalry. Interestingly, the three most powerful leaders in the world, now including President Trump, China's Xi Jinping, and Russia's Vladimir Putin, have all spoken at Davos in the past. However, lately, under their leadership, the US, China, and Russia have all become revisionist powers, seeking radical changes to the world order. Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 cost Russia its economic ties with the West, all for his vision of Russian grandeur. Xi's China has grown more nationalistic and aggressive towards Taiwan. Meanwhile, Trump demands major changes to the global trading system and America's relationships with its allies. It's not surprising that Russia and China are pushing for change. Russia aims to regain lost influence, while China seeks to have the world accommodate its rise. But American revisionism is the most puzzling and far-reaching of all. The US remains the world's most powerful country and largest economy, with the dollar as the global reserve currency. Its alliance system ensures the security of Europe, Asia, and the Americas. But Trump is ready to challenge almost every aspect of this liberal international order: trade, alliances, migration, multilateralism, human rights. America's traditional allies, countries like the UK, Japan, Canada, South Korea, Germany, and the EU, are most threatened by this shift. They've grown accustomed to open US markets and security guarantees against authoritarian threats. However, Trump's plan to impose tariffs on close allies and question NATO's mutual defense commitments has sent shockwaves through allied nations. At one point, he even suggested letting Russia act freely against NATO members not meeting defense spending targets. In Canada, this sparked intense debate. Chrystia Freeland, the former finance minister, criticized Prime Minister Trudeau for downplaying the threat of America's aggressive economic nationalism. She warned that Canada must brace for a potential tariff war, with Trump threatening duties as high as 25%. So the message is clear. Alliances are under pressure, and the old rules no longer apply. And diplomats across the Western world are grappling with how to respond to Trump's tariff threats. The challenge lies in understanding his true intentions. Is he a dealmaker, or a revolutionary set on disrupting the system? The EU's initial approach is to hope Trump's tariff threats are just a negotiating tactic, aiming for a reasonable deal before things escalate into a trade war. But if Trump moves forward with his tariffs long-term, Brussels is likely to retaliate. Other American allies, like the UK and Japan, might take a different route. The UK hopes Trump will spare it, given the small trade surplus the US has with Britain. Even if tariffs hit, the strong security ties between London and Washington will make any UK government think twice before engaging in a trade war. Japan, with its large trade surplus with the US, is a likely target for Trump tariffs. However, Japanese officials believe they'd avoid retaliating. Like the UK, Japan is wary of provoking the Trump administration into using American security guarantees as leverage in trade talks. This need for allies to balance trade and security highlights a bigger challenge. Not just the global economic order, but the balance of power in Europe and Asia is also at risk. Russia and China are pushing for changes to international borders in the global security landscape. Putin and Xi both see opportunities in today's global shift. At the BRICS summit in Russia, Xi praised the rise of a new global era, defined by turbulence and transformation. Putin echoed this in Sochi, claiming, "An entirely new world order is emerging." While Trump aims to enhance America's power in this new order, Putin's goal is to diminish US influence. Xi shares this view, stating, "The East is rising while the West is declining." Both Russia and China aim to strengthen the BRICS as a counterweight to the G7. Beyond rhetoric, both leaders have territorial ambitions. It's widely believed that Russia not only wants to retain control over occupied Ukrainian land, but also seeks to undermine Ukraine's independence, gaining a veto over its foreign and security policies while installing a pro-Moscow government in Kyiv. Furthermore, Putin's pre-war demands went beyond Ukraine. In December 2021, Russia issued an ultimatum calling for the withdrawal of NATO forces from Eastern Europe, particularly countries that joined after the Soviet bloc's collapse. NATO believes the war's heavy losses for Russian forces may push Putin to adopt more radical policies. A Russian victory in Ukraine could embolden Xi to pursue his own revisionist goals in Asia, particularly regarding Taiwan. While Beijing views Taiwan as part of China, the island's self-governance could only be ended through intense pressure or invasion. Speculation suggests Xi might aim to conquer Taiwan by 2027, though he has publicly set 2050 as the target. At 71, he may seek to secure his legacy sooner. President Biden has stated the U.S. is ready to defend Taiwan, but Trump has not made such a commitment. The incoming U.S. president, while surrounded by China hawks, has campaigned as a peace candidate, praising both Xi and Putin. Trump's America First agenda will be complicated by global power dynamics, particularly the actions of revisionist leaders in Moscow and Beijing. Given all the elements involved, there can be no certainties about how the New World Order will evolve, only scenarios. So here are 5 possibilities. Trump's transactional approach, his desire to avoid war, and his disdain for democratic allies could lead the U.S. to strike a new grand bargain with Russia and China. In this scenario, the U.S. quietly grants both nations spheres of influence in their regions, while focusing on asserting dominance in its own backyard, pressuring Mexico and Canada, aiming to reclaim the Panama Canal, and eyeing control over Greenland. Trump forces a peace deal on Ukraine, but without security guarantees. Sanctions on Russia are relaxed, and Putin is even invited to Thanksgiving dinner at Mar-a-Lago. A potential deal with China might involve lifting tech restrictions and tariffs in exchange for Chinese purchases of American goods and lucrative deals for U.S. companies like Tesla in China. Trump would also signal that he's not willing to fight to defend Taiwan. Meanwhile, U.S. allies in Europe and Asia would be left scrambling to secure their own defense, as a new atmosphere of insecurity takes hold. The second scenario is that Western allies find themselves in a trade war, while political instability spreads across Europe, with populist movements gaining ground, sympathetic to both Trump and Putin. A ceasefire is reached in Ukraine, but fears linger that Russia will resume hostilities. Trump repeatedly questions America's commitment to defend its allies. Amid Western disarray, China, Russia, or North Korea, possibly in combination, decide to take military action in Asia and Europe. But they miscalculate. Democracies in both regions fight back, and eventually the U.S. is drawn into the conflict, repeating the patterns of the 20th century. Thirdly, the U.S., China, Russia, and the EU avoid direct conflict, but Trump's America First policies create a leadership vacuum. Global economic growth suffers from his trade wars, and civil conflicts in places like Sudan and Myanmar worsen. The UN, crippled by big power rivalries, is powerless to act. Instead, regional powers fuel conflicts, seeking advantage and resources. More countries like Haiti descend into anarchy, and refugee flows to the West increase. Populist parties, hostile to liberal democracy, thrive in the growing climate of insecurity. The U.S. retreats behind tariff walls and exits the World Trade Organization. Prices rise, and American goods become lower quality. In response, the world accelerates economic interdependence. The EU finalizes trade deals with Latin America, India, and China, opening its market to Chinese electric vehicles and green tech. In return, China sets up factories in the EU and restrains Russian aggression. The global south deepens ties with China, and the BRICS expand, gaining more influence. Meanwhile, the dollar's dominance as the global currency begins to decline. Lastly, Trump's belief in American power is proven right. Investment floods into the U.S., boosting its lead in tech and finance. Europe and Japan ramp up defense spending, deterring Russian and Chinese aggression. American tariffs severely impact Chinese growth, pushing their system into crisis. Under pressure from military, economic, and domestic forces, the Iranian regime finally falls. Trump's prestige skyrockets, both at home and abroad. American liberals fall silent, and some of his critics face imprisonment. The stock market reaches new heights. The next 4 years are likely to be a mix of all these scenarios, along with several unexpected twists. As Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci wrote in the late 1920s, "The old is dying and the new cannot be born." In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear.